In the most powerful empire on earth, one young woman held a secret that could get her killed. Her name was Esther. She was beautiful, wise, and beloved by the king of Persia, Ahasuerus. Out of hundreds of women in the royal palace, he had chosen her to become queen. But the king did not know the truth. Esther was a Jew, and across the empire, a powerful official named Haman had just convinced the king to sign a terrifying decree, a law that could not be changed, a law that ordered the destruction of every Jew in the Persian Empire, men, women, and children. From the grand cities of Persia to the smallest villages, a date had been chosen. On that day, they would all be wiped out. Fear spread quickly among the Jewish people. They mourned in the streets. They wore sackcloth and ashes. And Esther's cousin, Mordecai, sent her an urgent message from outside the palace walls. You must go to the king and beg for mercy. But there was a problem, a deadly one. No one, not even the queen, was allowed to approach the king without being summoned. Anyone who walked into the throne room uninvited would be executed immediately, unless the king chose to spare them. And Esther had not been called for 30 days. If she walked into that throne room, she could die before even speaking a word. For a moment, fear gripped her heart. But Mordecai sent her one final message, a message that would echo through history. Who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Esther looked toward the palace doors. If she stayed silent, her people would die. If she spoke up, she might die. But that day, the young queen made a decision that would change the fate of an entire nation. And it began with 5 powerful words. If I perish, fire. Long before the danger appeared, before the palace, before the crown, the life of Esther began in a much quieter place. She was a young Jewish girl living in the vast Persian Empire, far from the land of her ancestors. Her people had once lived freely in Israel, but generations earlier they had been taken into exile. Now they lived scattered across foreign lands, trying to survive under the rule of powerful kings. Esther's life had not been easy. She had lost both of her parents while still very young. But she was not alone. Her cousin Mordecai had taken her in and raised her like his own daughter. Mordecai was a wise and faithful man who worked near the royal palace gates. From the time Esther was a child, he taught her to remain humble, wise, and faithful to the God of Israel. For many years their lives remained simple and quiet. But everything changed one day when shocking news spread throughout the empire. The powerful King Ahasuerus had removed his queen from the throne. The palace was suddenly without a queen, and the king's advisors began searching for the most beautiful young women across the entire empire. Messengers traveled from city to city. They gathered young women from noble families and common homes alike. All of them were taken to the royal palace. Among them was Esther. When she arrived at the palace, no one knew who she truly was. Mordecai had warned her to keep one secret carefully hidden. She must not reveal that she was a Jew. Inside the palace walls, Esther entered a world of luxury and competition. The young women were given beauty treatments, fine clothing, and months of preparation before they would appear before the king. Many hoped the king would choose them. Many dreamed of becoming queen. But Esther remained different. She stayed humble. She listened carefully to the palace servants. She treated everyone with kindness. And slowly, people began to notice her. Even the chief palace official showed her special favor. Month after month passed. Finally, the night came when Esther would stand before the king. If he was pleased with her, she could become queen of the most powerful empire on earth. But if he was not, she would disappear back into the palace forever. When Ahasuerus finally saw Esther, something unexpected happened. Out of all the women brought before him, the king chose her. The quiet orphan girl raised by Mordecai became the new queen of Persia. The palace celebrated. A royal feast was held across the empire. But behind the celebration, a secret remained hidden. The king did not know that his new queen belonged to the very people who would soon face destruction. And far away, in the palace court, a man named Haman was already rising to power. A man whose hatred would soon place Esther in the most dangerous position of her life. As Queen Esther settled into her new life inside the royal palace, the Persian Empire continued to grow stronger under the rule of King Ahasuerus. The king trusted many advisors to help govern such a massive empire. But among them, one man quickly rose above all the others. His name was Haman. The king promoted Haman to one of the highest positions in the entire kingdom. Soon, Everyone in the royal court was ordered to bow down and show honor whenever Haman passed by. For most people, it was a simple command. They bowed their heads. They showed respect. But there was one man who refused. Near the palace gate stood Mordecai, Esther's cousin, the man who had raised her since childhood. Day after day, when Haman walked past the gate, the officials bowed low to the ground. But Mordecai remained standing. At first, the other servants were confused. "Why do you disobey the king's command?" they asked him. But Mordecai would not change his decision. He would not bow. Finally, the servants told Haman about Mordecai's refusal. When Haman saw it with his own eyes, anger filled his heart. His pride had been wounded. One man, refusing to honor him. But when Haman learned something else, his anger grew far worse. Mordecai was a Jew. Suddenly, this was no longer about one man. Hatred began to grow inside Haman's mind. If Mordecai would not bow, then Mordecai's entire people should be destroyed. Instead of punishing Mordecai alone, Haman began planning something far more terrifying. He would wipe out every Jew living throughout the empire. To make his plan succeed, Haman went directly to the king. Standing before Ahasuerus, he spoke carefully, hiding his true hatred behind clever words. "There is a certain people scattered among the nations of your empire," Haman said. "Their laws are different from everyone else. They do not obey the king's laws." Then he made a chilling proposal. "If it pleases the king, let a decree be written to destroy them." The king, unaware of the full truth, agreed. He removed his royal signet ring and handed it to Haman, the symbol of royal authority. That single moment sealed the fate of an entire nation. Messengers were quickly sent throughout the vast Persian Empire. The royal decree was announced in every city. On a chosen day, all Jews, young and old, men, women, and children, were to be killed. Their homes and possessions would be taken. Across the empire, panic and sorrow spread among the Jewish people. But inside the royal palace, Queen Esther still knew nothing. And the man who had set this terrible plan in motion, Haman, sat down to celebrate, certain that no one could stop what he had begun. When the decree was announced, sorrow swept across the Persian Empire like a dark storm. In every city where the king's order arrived, Jewish families were thrown into panic. Men tore their clothes in grief. Women wept in the streets. Entire communities mourned, knowing that a single day had been chosen for their destruction. And outside the palace gates, Mordecai could no longer hide his anguish. He dressed himself in sackcloth and ashes, the ancient sign of deep mourning. He cried loudly at the entrance of the palace, refusing to remain silent while his people faced extinction. But inside the palace walls, Queen Esther had not yet heard the full story. When her servants told her that Mordecai was sitting at the gate in mourning clothes, she became deeply concerned. She immediately sent new garments for him to wear, hoping he would remove the sackcloth and return to normal. But Mordecai refused. Something far worse was happening. So Esther sent one of the king's trusted messengers to speak with Mordecai and discover what had happened. Outside the palace, Mordecai explained everything. He described the terrible plan of Haman. He showed the written decree ordering the destruction of the Jews. He explained how the king Ahasuerus had unknowingly allowed it. Then Mordecai gave the messenger a command for Esther. She must go to the king. She must reveal the truth. She must beg for mercy for her people. When the message reached Esther, fear filled her heart. She knew the law of the palace better than anyone. No one, not even the queen, was allowed to approach the king without being invited. Anyone who entered the throne room unannounced would be executed immediately, unless the king chose to extend his golden scepter and spare their life. And Esther had not been summoned for 30 days. If she walked into that throne room now, she might die before speaking a single word. So Esther sent a message back to Mordecai explaining the danger. But Mordecai's reply would change everything. His words carried both warning and purpose. Do not think that because you live in the king's palace, you will escape when all the other Jews are destroyed. Then he said something that would echo through history. And who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. When Esther heard those words, she understood something powerful. Perhaps becoming queen had never been an accident. Perhaps this moment was the reason she had been placed on the throne. And so the young queen made a decision that would risk her life. She sent one final message back to Mordecai. Gather all the Jews in the city and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days. My servants and I will fast as well." Then she declared the words that revealed her courage. "After that, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law." And with quiet determination, Esther prepared to walk into the throne room of Ahasuerus, a place where one wrong step could cost her life. For 3 days, the Jewish people in the city fasted and prayed. No food, no water. Across the Persian Empire, fear still hung in the air like a coming storm. The decree of destruction had already been sealed with the authority of King Ahasuerus. Once a royal law was written and stamped with the king's signet ring, it could never be undone. Inside the palace, Queen Esther prepared herself for the most dangerous moment of her life. She knew the risk. If the king rejected her appearance in the throne room, the guards would execute her instantly. No explanation. No second chance. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes. She stood quietly for a moment, gathering the courage she would need. Then she walked through the long palace corridors toward the throne room. Each step brought her closer to judgment. The doors opened. Inside the great hall, the king sat upon his throne, surrounded by royal officials and guards. The entire room fell silent as Esther stepped into view. Everyone knew the law. The queen had entered without being summoned. For a moment, time seemed to stop. All eyes turned toward the king. Would he show mercy, or would he give the order for her execution? King Ahasuerus looked at the young queen standing before him. And then something unexpected happened. Instead of anger, the king's face softened. Slowly, he lifted the golden scepter in his hand and extended it toward her. Esther's life had been spared. She stepped forward and gently touched the tip of the golden scepter. The king spoke with curiosity. "What is it, Queen Esther? What do you wish?" "Even up to half of my kingdom, it will be given to you." But Esther did not reveal everything at once. Instead, she made a surprising request. "If it pleases the king," she said, "let the king and Haman come today to a banquet that I have prepared." The king immediately agreed. Soon that evening, both the king and Haman sat together at the royal banquet prepared by Queen Esther. Wine was served. The atmosphere was calm and celebratory. Once again, the king turned to Esther. "What is your request, Queen Esther?" "It shall be granted to you." But Esther remained patient. "My request and petition is this," she said. "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to another banquet that I will prepare." The king agreed again. Haman left the palace that night feeling proud and honored. Out of all the powerful men in the empire, he alone had been invited to dine privately with the king and the queen. But as he walked past the palace gate, he saw someone standing there. Someone who still refused to bow. It was Mordecai, and the sight of him filled Haman with burning rage once again. That very night, Haman made a cruel decision. Instead of waiting for the day when all the Jews would be destroyed, he would have Mordecai executed immediately. So he ordered his servants to build a massive wooden gallows, 50 cubits high. The next morning, he planned to ask the king for permission to hang Mordecai on it. But while Haman slept that night, confident in his power, something unexpected was about to happen inside the palace. A small event that would quietly begin turning the entire story upside down. That night, something strange happened inside the royal palace. King Ahasuerus could not sleep. For a ruler who controlled the vast Persian Empire, this was unusual. The palace was quiet, the night calm, but sleep would not come. To pass the time, the king ordered his servants to bring the royal chronicles, the official records of everything that had happened in the kingdom. The servants began reading aloud, page after page, story after story, until suddenly they reached an important record. It told of a man who had once uncovered a dangerous plot against the king's life. 2 palace guards had secretly planned to assassinate the king, but someone had exposed their plan before it could happen. That man was Mordecai. The king sat up, surprised. What honor or reward was given to Mordecai for this? He asked. The servants checked the records. Nothing has been done for him, they replied. The king frowned. Such loyalty should never go unrewarded. Just then, early in the morning, someone arrived at the palace court. It was Haman. He had come with his own plan, to ask the king for permission to execute Mordecai on the massive gallows he had built during the night. But before Haman could speak, the king asked him a question. Haman, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Haman's heart leaped with excitement. Surely the king was talking about him. Who else could deserve such honor? With pride filling his voice, Haman described an extravagant reward. For the man the king wishes to honor, he said, bring a royal robe that the king himself has worn. Bring a horse that the king has ridden, with a royal crown placed on its head. Then let one of the king's highest officials lead that man through the city streets, proclaiming, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." The king smiled. "That is an excellent idea," he said. "Now go at once and do exactly as you have said for Mordecai, who sits at the king's gate." For a moment, Haman froze. The man he hated more than anyone in the world was about to receive the greatest public honor in the empire. But the king's command could not be ignored. Reluctantly, Haman obeyed. That day, the proud official who had planned Mordecai's death was forced to lead him through the streets of the capital city. Haman walked in front of the horse, shouting the king's command for everyone to hear. "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." Humiliation burned inside him. When it was over, Mordecai quietly returned to the palace gate. But Haman rushed home in despair. He told his family everything that had happened, and their response filled him with fear. If Mordecai is truly one of the Jews, they warned him, you will not overcome him. Instead, you will surely fall before him. Before Haman could even recover from the humiliation, the king's servants arrived at his house. It was time for the second banquet with Queen Esther. Haman followed them back to the palace. But he had no idea. This banquet would be the moment when the truth was finally revealed. That evening, the king once again came to the royal banquet prepared by Queen Esther. Beside him sat the powerful official Haman, still unaware that his fate was about to change forever. Wine was served, and the atmosphere in the palace dining hall was calm. But this time, the king decided to press Esther again for an answer. King Ahasuerus turned toward her and said, "Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be granted to you, even up to half of my kingdom." For a moment, Esther took a breath. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment that could save her people or destroy her life. With courage in her voice, she finally spoke. "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, spare my life, and spare the lives of my people." The king looked confused. "What do you mean?" he asked. Then Esther revealed the truth. "My people and I have been sold to destruction, to be killed and wiped out." The king was shocked. "Who would dare to do such a thing?" he demanded. "Who is responsible for this?" Esther slowly turned and pointed across the table. "The adversary and enemy is this wicked man." It was Haman. The room fell silent. The king rose in fury and walked out into the palace garden, trying to control his anger. Haman suddenly realized the truth. The queen he had been plotting against was one of the very people he had condemned. Desperate and terrified, Haman fell to the couch where Esther was sitting, begging for his life. But at that exact moment, the king returned. When he saw Haman collapsed near the queen, he became even more enraged. "Will he even assault the queen in my own palace?" the king shouted. Immediately, the palace guards seized Haman. Just then, one of the servants spoke up. "There is a gallows 50 cubits high standing at Haman's house. He prepared it for Mordecai, the man who once saved the king's life." The king did not hesitate. "Hang him on it," he ordered. And so the very gallows that Haman had built for Mordecai became the place of his own downfall. Soon after, the king gave Haman's position to Mordecai. Esther finally revealed that Mordecai was her cousin, and he was placed in a position of great honor within the kingdom. The decree against the Jews could not be erased, but the king allowed them to defend themselves. When the appointed day arrived, the Jewish people stood together and overcame those who had planned their destruction. Across the empire, their sorrow turned into celebration. The day that was meant to destroy them became a day of victory. And every year after that, the Jewish people celebrated a festival remembering how their lives had been saved. A story of courage, a story of justice, and the story of a young queen who risked everything for her people. The story of Esther. Crown.